Hi, I didn't see you there. Welcome to Season 2 of the Lamentations of the Flame Princess YouTube channel. We'll get back to the silly skits soon enough. But for this next series, I'm going to present some real talk about the RPG hobby. Formatting note, I do the real stuff in this format. In front of a plain green screen, stripped down and all. In this format, I'll have the teleprompter running, but there will be no edits for minor speakos. The point of these is not a slick presentation, but a you-to-me conversation, genital warts and all. So, it's been suggested to me that I should present in video form some of the old LotFP blog posts that set the stage for and defined what LotFP was going to be. And that sounded like exceedingly easy content to make. And it'll rack up the watchable hours on the channel. But looking over all that writing to decide what still might be relevant today, that was over a quarter of my life ago when I was still full of piss and vinegar. I had absolutely nothing to lose. And it makes me a bit sad to consider my current old self broken down by so much bullshit. Would it be a lie to try and present these essays as if they were for me rather than the person I used to be? Will the context of the moment be completely lost if I present them as they were, or should I completely fuck them up by adapting them to the modern day? Nah. Hell with it. Maybe I can learn a few things from my younger self. And if you're watching this, you obviously have the internet and way too much time on your hands. So you can figure out the context if you really want to. So the first in this series will be my most read blog post ever from June 12th, 2008. I hate fun. I hate what I like. I like cookies and McDonald's and chocolate. I like Godzilla movies and all those fucking direct-to-video horror movies that only an idiot would look at and think, gee, let's rent this. I like sitting at the computer for hours on end playing Civilization 4. It's shit. It's all shit. It doesn't enrich my life in any way, but it does turn my brain off. Quickly, conveniently, easily, cheaply. No effort. What it does is separate myself from living life and reduces it to passing time. It distracts me and detaches me from the only thing I have, life. And therefore, it is no good. Instead of doing and being, all too often I am seeking sensory stimulation. Artificial feelings stimulated most effectively through passively consuming things that other people have done. The very idea of wanting to be entertained is an exercise in self-nullification. I want more. I want that doing. I want that being. I want it in a way that gives my life significance. I want engagement in the things I do, and I want meaning in the things I engage with. I want all the feelings that entertainment artificially instills in me, but I want them to be genuine. Engagement and meaning is commonly attributed to those terrible things known as other people. I can't socialize. I won't socialize. It's embarrassing enough to know that I waste substantial periods of my life seeking and accepting entertainment, being mentally comatose instead of being active and involved in my own life. How am I supposed to be exposed to other people behaving this way and have a shred of respect for them? I just want to shake them. We're real people. We're together. We don't have to be alone, dead in mind, vacant in spirit. We should do. We should create. Support each other in our times of weakness and make our mark in the world, for we are human. But no, much of our interactions with others is simply wasting more time being entertained. Sometimes being entertained by discussing entertainment which has been previously experienced. Maybe everybody even gets entertained together, focusing their attention on something while under the impression they're spending time with someone else. Nobody really discusses anything. Nobody explores ideas together. Nobody fucking does anything in their spare time with each other. Individual pools of waste are flooded by entertainment to become great lakes of worthlessness. And the problem is made all the more frustrating by the fact that people know this. They know they're watching crap, but they watch it because nothing else is on. They know that eating another bag of potato chips is against their best interests. And, it even contributes to the ending of their lives. But those things just taste so good, don't they? People settle for garbage because it is convenient to do so, and we have all been trained to think that effort is work, and work should be reserved for those times when you're laboring for the benefit of someone else in order to collect your paycheck. Work and effort outside of employment is a waste of time, so relax, sit back, and passively consume entertainment. You deserve it after all that hard work you've done. And so people have convinced themselves that they have no time. Today's lifestyle is busy, on the go, so today's entertainment had better be fast-paced and compact as possible to deal with it. This cycle of disempowerment and uselessness has crept into every facet of society, and it is no good. Change is constant in life, but not all change is progress. For all of the pressure that's placed on people, the final responsibility for their lives is theirs alone. Being influenced by others is a choice that is made. And rising above all of the negative, defeating influences, that's a choice to be made as well. Deny passive entertainment. Demand to be engaged, enriched, and fulfilled by your hobbies and by the people you choose to associate with. Reject convenience for convenience's sake. It's all good and well to do things for yourself faster and better. It is no good to hand the doing over to somebody or something else so you are no longer putting in any effort at all. Know the difference and what it means to your life. Okay, well, I wrote that about a year ago. Well, a year ago when I originally wrote that. So I wrote that in 2007 for the introduction of the next, and still even in 2022, still unreleased, issue of the LotFP metal zine. I went on to describe how this mentality was killing the heavy metal spirit within the heavy metal scene as it once again rose to mainstream prominence. It also expresses a lot of my frustration with life, having all this energy and free time and want to do something, but only able to find people who are being passive. The doers seem to have, found better people to be around already. Throwing my hat into the writing about RPGs ring, in May 2008, I had a bit of a revelation. With metal, I was writing about something I discovered after leaving high school. I had no ability to actually participate in it. I was an observer, I was a listener, and my writing was a means to be active within the scene. With RPGs, I can perform the core activity I'm writing about, as I've been doing since I was 8 years old. That was a quarter of a century at the time of the original writing, 38 years now in 2022. I'm much more qualified to be writing about RPGs than I am heavy metal. Not that I'll stop writing about heavy metal, even if not for official publication. And thinking about some blogging subjects or video essay subjects, I came back to this old intro. It applies to RPGs just as much, if not more, as it does to music. People want to be entertained by their role-playing. People want to sit down and get what they want out of it every time, and they want it quick. They don't want to work for it, and they don't want to risk that it won't happen when they try to play. This is how I've, come to interpret, when people use the word fun in relation to role-playing games. People wanting to quick fix, feel-good entertainment exactly as they like it, with as little effort as possible. And I hate it. Fun, in the context of RPG discussions, is like some Orwellian inversion of meaning. Speaking of which, how big of an example of this in a certain internet forum's use of the term bad, wrong fun. It shuts down discussion and makes it clear that, thinking that anything is important is foolish. No criticism or education allowed. So much so about the Orwellian thing that I think that people who talk about fun in RPGs are destroying the hobby, because fun ruins RPGs much like it ruins everything else that requires time, imagination, and a fair bit of concentration. Think about how often you see people on the internet message boards talking about things which get in the way of their fun in gaming. What do they mean by that, really? Are they looking for the real satisfaction, or are they looking for the quick fix? There is a concept called the tyranny of fun in how it cheapens role-playing games. The term was coined by notable OSR luminary Melon, aka Gabor Lux, and apologies for any mispronunciations. And I will now read an excerpt from that explanation. Quote, "This begs the question, why does the Wizards of the Coast R&D team strive for so strict a balance, and why does it intend to strip away out-of-the-box options from you? I call this phenomenon the tyranny of fun. A ludicrous name for a ludicrous concept, but there you have it. The Wizards of the Coast designers are not bad people. I am sure, for example, that the folks working there don't hate the game or anything. Maybe they don't even kick puppies on their way home. Maybe they help old ladies across the street. They want you to have fun. Good, yes? Yes? No. The idea went wrong long ago and shows no signs of getting better. When dealing with game philosophy, Wizards R&D doesn't concentrate on thinking up stuff that makes playing fun anymore. That's 1970s TSR thinking. Moreover, fun is inherently subjective and hard to quantify. All we have is meaningless truisms, like, the game is about killing critters and taking their stuff, getting loot and powering up, playing my character, or sitting around eating chips. That's not very helpful. It is all true, of course, but it doesn't really tell you what to emphasize in the game. So instead, they try to remove things from the game which are not fun. What isn't fun? The things the fans complain about. But who complains? In short, the kind of people older rulebooks, pardon my edition snobbery, but that's just how I see it, warned us about. People whose characters got their swords destroyed by a rust monster and who threw a hissy fit over it. People whose characters died to a hold person spell and who wrote angry letters to Dragon Magazine. People who didn't have fun, whose entertainment was destroyed by this monster or that spell. Meet Wizards of the Coast's focus groups. Meet the people who are the target audience for future releases. The final response is always going to be to remove any edge, any color, to remove randomness and introduce standardized fair play into the game, which started out as highly arbitrary and whimsical. In short, fantastic and open to creative interpretation. This response is a symptom of a design culture which would never be capable of designing a game like Dungeons and Dragons. Unquote. This is why having an attitude of live and let live doesn't work. Those who demand everything easy and quickly will always outnumber those that don't, and pretty soon a hobby that was custom made for the studious and imaginative and thorough now belongs to an entirely different caste, while those of us that the hobby was created for are left on the fringes, told that we're just not compatible with today's gaming, and sometimes even today's life in general. Fuck that. Fuck that. This hobby is ours. These other types can come and play and we'll welcome them with open arms and show them the way if they ask. But to dictate fast food mentality and my imaginative tools, that means war. Tyranny of Fun nails it. Role-playing companies and their doomed efforts in ignoring the anomalous nature of role-playing's mainstream popularity of the 80s target the type of people that aren't well suited for role-playing to buy their products. Because let's face it, it takes a certain something odd to be a real role player. Nerd and geek and such are not terms of endearment. They are insults. But they do prove the point that we're not normal everyday types. Now, being different or even abnormal is not a negative thing. Don't confuse it with the mythical cat piss man or lawn crapper, as it doesn't preclude us from having a job, friends, and girlfriends. But pretending we're normal and pretending that just anyone can pick up this hobby and enjoy it without making wholesale changes to the hobby is simply nonsense. Yeah, that sounds elitist, and it's meant to. Elitism is not a bad thing, especially when it comes to something that you can choose to do or not. Anyone can choose to roleplay, but not so many are willing to explore the source material of roleplaying, and not many are willing to immerse themselves in the game experience. Their choice in pretending they're the same as the people who really get serious about this stuff is just insane. I proclaim role-playing to be something based on its origins, and that no matter how much things have changed... Wait. Stop right there! Tangent time! Yeah! Okay. This is very important. Very important. Never let anyone say that the game has evolved. It hasn't. Ever. Maybe the way you play it has evolved. Maybe. But the game itself hasn't. You could say it evolved if you took the same book from the shelf and suddenly a rule was mysteriously different here and there, more and more as the years go by. But that doesn't happen. The game is changed intentionally, for better or for worse. Changed by people doing the changing. It's not an accident. It's not an evolution. It didn't have to happen. It's willful alteration. Got that? Don't let people get away with the evolved line. Always confront and correct. Sure, you'll be seen as an asshole if you do, but it seems to me that it is better to be an asshole for challenging this wording than it is to passively accept being a sort of genetic throwback Neanderthal freak, since you haven't kept up with the evolution. Because it's not evolution, it's intelligent design. Anyway, now, back to your previously scheduled rant. Okay. The best role players are the ones that take it seriously, make it important in their lives, and give it their all. People who do this are the most important part of any hobby. You want to be a casual gamer? It's fine, it really is. But don't expect the same level of deference and respect that a lifer is going to get. Those who take their activities seriously are the ones that matter for that activity. But in reality, people who take things seriously, who actually become knowledgeable and who actually expect newcomers to respect tradition and who expect newcomers to actually learn something and who discourage equal treatment for every dumb shit that falls off the turnip truck, they are insulted by the turnip truckers. Peer pressure is important, and there are a whole lot more dumb shit fun seekers who balk at the idea of fun being related to effort and investment of time than there are people who want to learn and be immersed in their hobby as a whole, not just while they're goofing off with some pals on a Saturday night. And companies want to be successful. They don't realize that industries built on hobbies, especially this one, are fucked. It's not a respect issue. Role-playing is done from the ground up, not from the top down. That's how it started, and that's how it exists. You know the argument, if only RPGs were respected, then they generate a lot of money for the people that make them, and all of our products would be better. How do you gain the respect? Marginalize and hide the people that take RPGs seriously. Those people turn off the normals who would spend the serious money. So how do you nudge out the lifers and encourage more casual play? Absolute balance. Be able to participate equally in all ways right out of the box, by making sure there are plenty of hard and fast rules to master, instead of dealing with nebulous, ill-defined guidelines that make the human being, the referee, the final arbiter of a game. Rules people can understand, like chess. The closer you get to the true shared imagined space, the more the man on the street freaks out and rejects, and the more companies see imaginary what-if dollars going elsewhere. Also, you entice more casual play by having less harsh consequences in a game. You get the elimination of save or die, of level drains, or equipment destruction mechanics, or creatures, because those could give a negative experience to those that believe you win a game by always being successful. It's like these people don't know that winning in role-playing is done simply by enjoying the process of playing the game. Yeah, it's more gratifying and, dare I say, fun to succeed, but death and failure are hard-coded into the very essence of the game for a reason. It's not the cheap amusement park thrill of simulated or illusory danger. Make a bad decision, rely on luck to get you by, and the danger smacks your character down. People out there have gotten the idea if their precious imaginary equipment owned by their precious imaginary man is taken away from them, their fun has been sabotaged. And the game designers are listening. The clue phone is ringing, people, and it's a collect call for these fun seekers. You're not supposed to like it. Goddamn. Risk and challenge and failure are as much a part of role-playing as prancing around like Errol Flynn or Legolas or whatever the example is in 2022 that makes sense to people. I don't keep track of this shit anymore. Anyway, shit out there in the game is trying to kill you, and there are critters out there that will fuck you up but good if you're unlucky or not careful. What part of the giant spider bites you, oh, you blew your save, roll up a new character, is supposed to be fun or heroic? Obviously, the game was built on a different type of satisfaction. But these people don't want to spend their time figuring out challenges. That's part of that large percentage of not fun time that's being had in the average session of old fogey D&D, right? You know, they just want to charge right in. They must if they're always getting their shit rusted or their levels drained or poisoned or what have you. I mean, that's the only way that keeps happening, right? If they're not getting nicked by these things, they wouldn't complain. The point isn't, though, to make role-playing some sort of masochistic experience where it's all suffering and death and pain and failure. The point is, if all these things are real and present dangers, then success means more. And I think it's telling that so many people reject this idea. Assigning value to in-game success seems to be something embarrassing to a lot of people. Like an RPG is just supposed to be some interchangeable entertainment option to play with friends alongside, I don't know, a console system or Scrabble or watching a movie with no worth or value in and of itself. You know, I've already given my thoughts on this. Nothing beyond the barest essentials of life, food and water, has inherent meaning. Meaning is given to things and experiences by people. And assigning meaning to role-playing is not something to be ashamed of. It is a social game that strengthens social bonds, it exercises the imagination, it encourages reading and knowledge, and it is not a passive experience, and nothing in the experience is or should just be handed to you. Take the introduction to the Frank Menser basic set for Dungeons & Dragons back in the 80s. It is the finest introduction to Dungeons & Dragons that was ever penned, explaining the basics of everything, from classes and their abilities to combat in just 7 pages, of story-form prose, not rules blather. And the first-time D&D player going through that has an 80% chance to fail that saving throw against Bargle's spell. An 80% chance of losing. Alina dies. You can't save her. You must run from the ghouls or you die. Some would say that traditional Dungeons & Dragons was poorly designed because first-level characters were weak and that there was an uneven playing experience. It never seems to occur to these people that traditional Dungeons & Dragons was designed perfectly and that play experience was intentional. Menser's introduction shows what Dungeons & Dragons is all about, and it's not flashy heroism. It was never about that until Gygax was removed from TSR. You're not playing a game pretending to navigate your playing piece, called a character, through some story where you get to be the hero. You are using the rules to pretend to be someone and experience and react as that person would through a dangerous world. Nothing more, nothing less. If you want to be the hero, you get to try. To guarantee success is to defeat the entire purpose of role-playing. And then some will say that each edition of Dungeons & Dragons is based on the common fantasy trope of the times it was released. And that's just ignorant bullshit. Dungeons & Dragons was built on classic archetypes, with some game elements added onto them, and literature that was decades, in some case almost a century old, by the time Dungeons & Dragons came around. It was built to be timeless, not timely. And some of the more important influences, say Liber and Lovecraft, certainly didn't feature success as a common theme. It certainly wasn't all honor and glory, what with Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser and Conan and Cudgel being thieves, and worse as far as Conan at least was concerned. Yet the focus wasn't limited. There are still the influences of Tolkien and Paul Anderson and Lord Dunsany, and, to get, the more mythical, dreamier sides of fantasy. You could do it all with Dungeons & Dragons back in the day. Nothing was actually excluded. And this is what Dungeons & Dragons was, focused through rules that sprung out of the wargaming culture. As the game was altered through the years, this was lost. I don't know why it was decided that games sold in the form of number-filled books with fancy vocabulary would appeal to more people that didn't care to actually read literature, but that's what happened. Real choice in the manner of gameplay was lost, or at least obscured and made more difficult to achieve, all the while increasing the options for individual characters, and that was a great trick, giving players the illusion of more choice and increasing the detail and complexity of the rules while slapping the handcuffs on the game itself. Brilliant! Fuckers. But while Gygaxian D&D was forged from classic stories, with the perfect capacity to deal with the current fads, and that's where Tolkien comes into D&D, as a secondary hip source to lure the kiddies in, not a core component, the next generation of clueless imbeciles decided to tell us what D&D was all about, and inevitably led, as did most fantasy fiction, to using Tolkien as the core. Grand quests, heroics, and then it fed on itself. D&D itself became literature, which then influenced further iterations of the game. D&D basically created the video game and personal computing industries. Seriously. You think people at home were upgrading their computers to play the neat new version of Space Invaders? Or were they wanting the sweet, sweet graphics from a particular version of Bard's Tale? And those games, were easier to pick up and play with no investment or time or knowledge. And so then D&D took from that as well, being influenced by the games they influenced. If it was done to add to the current influences, maybe it would have worked. But the new influences replaced the influences that created D&D, and what's more, the modern influences are seen as competition, so aren't even explicitly mentioned. So D&D becomes more and more an ungrounded adventure game designed to be mindless entertainment, to only be taken seriously by the professionals who will lay out a specific path to fun. It's already been discussed to death how D&D has been retroactively described by its detractors as a hack and slash game, and how that description is dead wrong, as played by the people that created the damn game. We've seen how D&D increasingly makes the criticism come alive, making D&D more about encounters and carefully balanced tactical encounters than anything else, who see that the same people who decried D&D as a hackfest now embrace it for being specifically built as a hackfest. I mean, yeah, it is rather unfortunate that Dungeons & Dragons had the subtitle Rules for Fantastic Medieval War Games Campaigns Playable with Paper and Pencil and Miniature Figures. It's a historical problem that the term role-playing game, or any other suitable term to differentiate that from the wargaming hobby, which was at the time still in full swing, it's unfortunate it wasn't used, as role-playing wasn't its own genre at the time. It certainly wasn't a war game in any real sense, and Gygax, I don't know about Arneson, co-creator and writer of the actual original text, didn't even use miniatures in his game. But this is another example of the instant gratification crowd these days. The problem isn't that they don't know. I have no problem with people who are simply new. The problem is the people who don't care to know and become insulted when informed that their assumptions are dead fucking wrong. But it would still be inconvenient to research all this shit, and why bother when possessing this knowledge will make you some sort of weirdo and doesn't support what you've already made up your mind to do. It's a pain in the ass to deal with people who have a been there, done that, found it immature attitude when they don't even know where there is or what that even entails. Fucking hell, it's like someone not wanting to visit China for the Olympics for fear of fallout from the 2 atomic bombs that got dropped there during World War II. Duh. None of it makes any fucking sense. It's time to stand up, and it's time to make some noise. It's time to stand up and stop letting the lies about the origins of our game, which are the origins of the entire hobby, spread. It's time to stop letting the people who have no intention of taking all this seriously dictate the terms and create the labels. I'm tired of it. Old D&D is for old people. I'm 33 and not even as old as Gygax was when Dungeons & Dragons was originally released. Okay, maybe that was true when I wrote the original blog, yeah, but... And their target audience was people like them. But lest you say, remember, people in their 30s are old, remember that Gygax ran the game in its original form, pre-published form for his kids. Original D&D, while it encouraged and almost demanded source material reading, was itself not very much reading compared to what came after. Kill the misconceptions and the falsehoods. Stop taking the abuse caused by the assumption that current D&D is the real D&D, and everything that came before is some sort of 8-track equivalent relic. Hasbro may have a legal claim to the Dungeons & Dragons name, but they certainly have no moral claim to it. A multinational corporation who aren't interested in the game so much as the intellectual property it provides, bought a smaller game company, none of whose founders are still with the company, who bought another game company, none of whose founders were still with the company, and the fact that the creators of the game in question that started this chain were forced from the company at different points. Stop acting like we're guests in their house when it's the exact opposite. Stand up, and when people complain that we seem to not recognize their alternate play style, especially when they sure as hell aren't recognizing our play styles, you play your way, we'll play our way is dismissal, not recognition, tell them they better learn what the fuck they're talking about before they get to say anything. And this isn't directed at the stupid or the willfully ignorant. It's not even directed at those that know what they're talking about, know their history, explore their options, and decided the new stuff is better for them. No. Their minds are made up. The purpose of standing up and making noise is for the silent crowd that watches from the sidelines. We need to make sure our game isn't defined by people who don't like it. We have to be visible and make noise to these people, so these people see the early versions of the game are being played and are perfectly viable options for them. We have to make sure they know there is a history and a legacy and a depth to this hobby which can be explored. That there is life in this hobby beyond the shiny new release, which is to be given up once the trademark overlords decide it has outlived its usefulness and decides to create an even shinier, newer release. The silent crowd should always be reminded that the industry can never dictate the possibilities at their game table. If we manage to enlighten those actively dancing in the shadows, then yay, but that's not really the point. So go home, casual players, and take your fun with you. For those of you who gain enjoyment from a more involved experience, or at least the attempt at such, welcome. There is much to gain from everything you do on this planet by digging deeper, discovering traditions, and realizing there is a way that things can and perhaps should be done that often do not coincide with the ways that give the easiest and quickest pleasure. And so, yeah, it seems I do have a lot to learn from my younger self. Till next time.